don't you just start off by telling me your childhood and when was your first awareness of Jesus?
Okay. So I grew up in a smaller city in Michigan called Madison Heights. Um, and I spent the majority of my childhood there. Um, my parents were pretty devout Christians during my early childhood, and we attended a Baptist church up until the point I think probably till I was about 10 years old. So I was pretty incorporated in the church as a child. I went to, we did Awanas, we did all the summer programs and trips and stuff like that. The pastor and his wife would regularly come over and do Bible studies with my father and mother at the home. So when I first heard of Jesus, I guess would have been when I could first start understanding logical thought. I've known about Jesus. So my parents did a pretty good job of incorporating God into my life from an early age. Yeah.
I mean, would you say that you fully believed in Jesus
I
at
don't
that
think
point?
any. I don't know if anybody could reasonably say that they fully believed in Jesus as a child. Um, I mean, you kind of, at that age, you're believing in Santa Claus at the same time. So, yes, to answer your question, I did believe in Jesus, but, to look at it, uh, you know, did I fully believe in Jesus? Maybe in my childish mind. Yeah, I didn't have any type of, critical thinking at that point. So I guess the best answer would be I believed what I was being taught at that point in time.
Okay, gotcha. So, did you ever not believe in Christ as a child?
No, that's a very short answer, but no, there was no point in time during my childhood where I did not believe that there was a God or that Jesus Christ existed. Um, there may have been some occurrences to where maybe I doubted or questioned things, which I think is natural and healthy for anyone going through their faith journey. But as a child, I don't think I don't think there was ever a point in time to where I could directly pinpoint to where I could definitively say no, I didn't believe in Jesus. So maybe my faith wasn't the strongest. But at no point in time did I believe there was no God.
Would you say your faith was tested when you were a kid?
Yeah. So when I was about, it was 1992, so I would have been 9 or 10. I came home from school one day, and my dad had gotten into a serious car accident. He broke his spine. He bit off his tongue. He suffered brain damage. And that at that point in time, our lives were quite turned upside down. So praying to God and not seeing my dad immediately healed at that age, yeah, I would say, that scenario did in fact test my faith. And as a result of that accident, my dad was the supervisor for the water department of the city of Madison Heights. He worked for the city for about 27 years, I believe. And as a result of his accident, he could no longer work due to the injuries. So we ended up moving from Madison Heights to a very small rural town called Elmont, Michigan, and at that point, I think it was a big transition for my father, going from an everyday working man to not being able to work. So there was some anger, there was a lot of change in his demeanor in that adjustment period, but that ultimately resulted in the divorce of my parents. Which got very, very nasty. So yeah, my faith was certainly tested throughout that period of time.
Gotcha. So, and how do you feel like? Do you feel like that divorce? Is that something that um, how did that kind of affect you as a kid, as you're aging, and do you still look back at that time as something that kind of defines who you are?
Yes, I do look back at that time, and today, as a grown man, as a father, as a husband, I'm very grateful for what occurred at that point in time. I certainly don't think I would be who I am today if that time didn't occur. It got very dark between the ages of 12, well, 11, 12, 13, and so on and so forth from there. It got very dark. There was actually a point in time where I found myself raising my little sister. We weren't allowed to see my father and my mother. Uh, she was having a very hard time, and I don't want to say she abandoned us, but in a way she did. So I found myself raising my little sister for weeks on end, and my mom wouldn't just leave us without anything. She'd leave us some money and stuff, but I'd have to ride my bike 5 miles into town, get food, stuff like that. um, Being in that, going through that and being in the midst of the storm, it was very difficult. And my answer would have definitely been different at that point in time. I would have certainly said I wish this wasn't happening. But looking back at it now, I'm very grateful for that hardship. I'm very grateful for the seeds of faith that my parents planted in me as a small child. Ultimately, those are the things that would bring me back to God and get me to where I am today. And I had ways of dealing with that stuff, as you do as a child. I had a good friend of mine, and we would jump on the trampoline. I'd punch him in the face and commit violent acts against him, stuff like that. Really, just get my anger out on him. So, but
That
ultimately, I
sounds
got
like a
through
really,
that.
it sounds like a top-notch friend.
I would beg him not to show his black eye to his mom and tell her that I did it. So she
Yeah.
still blames me for everything today, which maybe is fine. But I'm very grateful for that hard road today. I am because you know what, Ryan, it affects me as a father, and it affects me as a husband. It affects me as a leader. Um, those were very trying times, and I, I'm very grateful for those times and the strength and knowledge to know how to overcome stuff like that. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned coming back to God. So, when do you feel like you started to drift away?
Okay.
Um, tell me about that process.
So as a result of that divorce, we ended up leaving Elmont and moving to pretty much Detroit, well, Dearborn, Michigan, but on the border of Detroit. And it's much different down there than it is up here. So I didn't do well in school. I was getting into fist fights. And I don't want to say I went to this deep depression or something. I didn't, but I was very lost. And I certainly found myself surrounded by the wrong people. It was I was began to use drugs and started committing crime and was getting violent with people and stuff like that. Um, but then I found cage fighting. I found MMA, and looking back, I do believe God led me there. So when I found MMA, I began training. Four out of 5 days of the week, and getting in the ring and being able to punch people and get punched, and learning how to wrestle and learning submissions and just feeling that pain. It was almost medicinal for me to be able to go in and exhaust those feelings that I had inside. Um, which ultimately led to a career in MMA. And I was certainly not, I never made it to the UFC or anything like that, but it was a very integral part of who I was as a person. Um, and that was the beginning of me going back to God after I had faded away, because I did fade away through those crucial teenage years. I didn't surround myself with anyone of faith. They were all, I don't want to call them bad people, but only one of them's alive today. So the world got the best of them. But God has always been with me. I can tell you for sure that I've always known God was with me and that He would pull me out of it.
What's you said you knew God was with you. So like what did you see? What did you feel that and was it just that seed that was planted that you trusted in?
I was very hyper aware of morality and the difference between right or wrong. I always have been. God has always I don't even know how to phrase it properly, but I've even when I was in the midst and hanging out with the wrong people and doing the wrong things, but the difference between them and I was that I knew it was wrong, and that I knew ultimately deep down that I didn't want to be doing those things, and doing stuff like that pushed me back into the direction of righteousness and the faith walk.
Gotcha. What do you have, like, would you say a defining moment of like, well, this was aha, it's time to come back to the church, like, or was it
Yep,
just something that was okay? What was?
yep. So although I when I began MMA, it was kind of like a slow return to my faith, and through
Okay.
my victories and losses, through the hardships and training, through the breaking of bones and damaging of flesh, all that stuff, I did begin to pray. I did begin to rely on God. And most of those were selfish prayers. God, I was praying to God to let me win in whatever cage fight I had upcoming and stuff like that. But I did still maintain a faith in God.